Ladies and gentlemen, welcome this afternoon at our GS1 Belgilux Innovation Café. You know why are we doing this? We like to go as Belgians to a pub to drink some beers and have some networking and discuss some interesting GS1 topics. It's a pity it's not possible today, but we do it digitally, and we have a fantastic topic to discuss. Is there a future for the old school EDI? And EDI, electronic data interchange, is one of the oldest processes we have in the companies, but also one of the most important ones because it's a supplier that gets an order from a retailer, and he prepares the goods, he sends a dispatch advice to the retailer to announce what he is going to deliver. He delivers the goods, and finally he sends an invoice to the retailer. And we call it the order-to-cash process. And yes, it's an important process because in this way the supplier gets paid for the goods he has delivered. And we're doing this in Belgium since a very long time. Even before the legal framework was there, we had separate agreements with the FISC and the VAT administration, and everyone was very happy about this process because, I'm sorry, because it was delivering the necessary, and can I have a bit water, the necessary things to make it happen in this important business process. So what we have seen in the recent years in Belgium is that we have been working all together to make this process more efficient. When I was here some years ago in GS1, we saw that the EDI process by retailer was sometimes different. And what we have done is we harmonized, let's say, thank you, Lisa. We harmonized, let's say, the processes between the retailers. We didn't want as GS1 that a supplier had a different EDI process with a different retailer. So that's what we are calling harmonized order to cash, and we're certainly coming back to this. But in the recent years, in my board and also in the community, everyone said we are very happy with the actual EDI process. It's doing what it needs to do. And we still believe that there is still some potential, and especially in the food service, we see that there is still some potential. Suppliers sometimes are complaining they still get orders from clients with a fax, with an email, with a phone, and this is of course something which we do not like in the GS1 community. What we want to have is a standardized exchange in this important business process with a GS1 order, with a GS1 dispatch advice, and with a GS1 invoice. But on the other hand, we were also questioning ourselves, is there indeed still a future for the old EDI? Because we were seeing that public authorities, what we call B2G, and also the European Union were simply saying, okay, we want to receive also the invoice in an electronic way with a new content and with a new, perhaps, language that we want to use, not a GS1 language, but another language. And so, okay, we need to adapt our strategy as GS1. We need to look to what the authorities are doing, and they wanted to have an electronic invoice, which is fantastic, because in fact the business requirements they are asking are the same. Please align the content we are exchanging, and please align in the network we are using, and please align, let's say, in the language of that content that we are using. So as GS1 Belgium and Luxembourg, we said, okay, let's adapt the strategy. We need to do two things. First, develop a knowledge center so that we have all the knowledge inside to tackle these new challenges together with our members. And secondly, let's give the community the necessary support to make that switch. And we ask ourselves the question, how long will, in the FMCG, but also in the DIY sector, how long will they work with the old EDI before they go, let's say, for new forms and new ways of exchanging that information and doing electronic invoicing with the new languages like UBL and the new content that's requested by the Belgian government and the European Commission. And how long will we, of course, have that bilateral and not via network, via the PEPAL network? So I hope today you will get some insights. What is the PEPAL network? What is the government requesting? What are the trends we can assess? And will we stay with the old EDI or go for the new EDI? And there's one thing that is really important. We as GS1, we want to support our members in that switch from B2B to B2G. We want to help them in delivering an electronic invoicing according to the requirements of the government. And we are doing that. We are transforming the old EDI invoice via mapping into the PEPL network to the public authorities, but we are also helping our community to have that new invoice with a new language, with a new network to be ready, let's say, for the public authorities. So yes, we are perhaps at a critical point in our history. What do we do? Do we keep the old EDI, or do we go to a very new system? And this is the topic of today. I wish you a wonderful afternoon. We have several speakers, but before I announce the first speaker, I think there is a poll that is going to be launched. I hope you can see it. They are seeing it, Lisa. Yes. And the question is there still a future for an old school EDI? I need to wait some seconds, and in the meantime, I'll talk a bit about this afternoon or the weather. So, but you will see the answers popping up in some seconds, and we will do the same question, I think, at the end to make sure that we have an answer later in the evening. If I see the answers, most of the people think that it's yes. Okay, so there is still a future for the old school EDI. There's good input for the panel. First speaker of today is Xavier de Wouters. Xavier de Wouters is Group Product Line Manager at Spadel, a famous Belgian Benelux brand that we know very well in the Benelux. And we call it active in the supply chain. And he knows, of course, for years, the old school EDI. He'll tell you more about his experiences with the old school EDI. Xavier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jan. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have the pleasure to present the small story of the EDI into Spadel organization. So Spadel is the Belgian group that produced and commercialized refreshing drinks like natural mineral waters, flavored waters, and lemonades. In fact, Spadel is an international group acting local. We have 2 factories in Belgium with 1 commercial office. We have also 1 commercial office in the Netherlands, 1 in the east of France, in the Alsace, and also, since a few years, 1 in Bulgaria. And so we act as local, but we try to think global. So it's the same headline as the GS1 company. Just for some digit, we produced more than 860,000 million liters by year, with more than 1,200 workers. And Spadel activated EDI from its beginning. In fact, Spadel participates at the construction of the CDB, Central Data Bank. So this is the prerequisite in order to be active in the EDI. If you can't exchange qualitative data, you can act as EDI players. And so Spadel subscribed to the CDB in Belgium and also to the GS1 DAS in the Netherlands. So like the group configuration, we participate also at local plan to the construction of the qualitative data and the new data exchange system. Because at the beginning, we were obliged to send 1 technical card to each customer, so a 1-to-1. But with the EDI, we need to activate with more qualitative and unique data. It's very important to be sure that the exchange data will be qualitative in order to have a qualitative operational process. This is important in the history of the EDI. At the beginning also, the EDI was mainly like a small project because we were obliged to make, so each partner has to make their own part of the way. And it's at the middle point we can communicate. And so we have to be sure that we speak the same language at this middle point. And it's why the data exchange is very important and critical at this level. At the beginning, so we mainly work with the EDI for the sales orders, with the big customers. Why? Because the interest was to automate the most repetitive processes and tasks we have day by day. And also regarding the investment it was needed to make in order to activate the EDI process, so the choice was to activate EDI with the big customers and sales orders level. Afterwards, we also extend the EDI with the dispatch advice and in the last years with the invoicing. And also during the last years, we activate the EDI to smallest customers, or not only in the home channel, but also in the out of home. So we see that the last months, new partners and new customers that who request to activate the EDI with them. And so it's not only more the playroom of the big players, but it's the playroom of everyone during the last year's months. Voilà, this is what I can explain at this time. So the prerequisite, if I can remember, the prerequisite is to exchange qualitative data. In order to do that, we have to activate our data into the global, in the GDSN network. And to do that, we activate it through the CDB and GS1 DAS. So that's the point we can explain at this. Voilà. So I don't know if you have a question or other point to ask.
Thank you, Xavier, for this inspiring session. Just one small question from the audience. Please share us with your lessons learned and the takeaways on starting and operating the transactional data exchange over the past 20 years. So very short, what are the lessons learned and the takeaways?
But the lessons learned is qualitative data to exchange. Be prepared to do that. Don't hesitate to reserve some resources to be sure to be sure that it will work correctly from the beginning, because it's very important. So the goal is also to automate a lot of repetitive transaction, daily operations. So if we can save a lot of time on repetitive automated action, we can gain time in order to be more present in the analysis of the data and the new decision. So we have to move the time used on repetitive tasks to time to analyze the situation, analyze the data, and also in order to take new right decision. That's important.
All right. Thank you for providing us that information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. So now we have two other speakers that are in our line-up. It's Johan Goossens and Cédric Nève. Johan is from a retailer, for the ones who are joining us from abroad. Colruyt is the market leader in Belgium in FMCG retail. And Cédric Nève is the founder and CEO of Digiteal. Colruyt, of course, has been since a very long time requesting harmonized order-to-cash invoices sent by EDI, and they also saw with us that there are some new things popping up in the market, and like PayPal and this kind of stuff. So it would be fantastic to see how a retailer is looking at the challenges ahead in the order-to-cash process. So Johan and Cédric, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. To be involved in EDI is to be passionately in love with change, by Edward A. Gilbert. I take you back to Berlin, 1948. An airlift of millions of tons of food and other supplies had to be done. Unfortunately, with all different types of manifests, shipping manifests in different forms, different languages. And that inspired Master Sergeant Gilbert to standardize the manifest. And that was the very beginning of EDI. Now, today we speak about a harmonized order to cash, but also within Colruyt, we did a long way before we arrived there. Colruyt had his punched card many years ago. I don't know for them who still know them. In 1987 then, we introduced the barcode as first retailer in Belgium on the products, still to improve this replenishment and to have a better inventory control. Now, before coming to the harmonized document, we started, unfortunately, it took 20 years action towards EDI test that we did. We did it with a few suppliers only, and in the old version D96A. After some time, we switched to the DO1B, not only for the 5 suppliers in test, but also the rollout started in 2009. We introduced some time later the dispatch advice, and again, 1 year later, an invoice, all directly in DO1B. And the first 5 suppliers were switched also to this new version. As the first suppliers were only standalone documents, the orders, nothing else, it was still some struggle to go to a 3-way match for all of them. From the very beginning, we give the opportunity to start with the full EDI or for smaller suppliers for a web EDI solution. Harmonized order to cash came. We support today the first 2 versions, not yet the 3rd one. As we speak, we have nowadays still 250 suppliers with the 3 documents, 3-way match in the order to cash, and another 450 in harmonized order to cash. In total, we have over 100 suppliers already who send or receive 1 or more documents or send it to us. More recent, for the government, as Jan said, the business to government, PEPL popped up, and that will Cédric explain later on. Also in different versions. Now for every industry has his own standard. For retail, it's the EDIFACT. I believe automotive has ODET. Maybe some more harmonization can be done, but I doubt if there's a profit to be taken. If you see the evolution from the first suppliers for 1 document till today, it took quite some time, some years, to have an increased volume in documents. But nowadays we can talk about over 100,000 documents sent every month through an electronic way. There is a gap between dispatch advice in orange and invoice or orders. That's because we do some intra-group sales and there is no reception in our stores for the products. Now, when I started the rollout in 2009, there was quite some discussions. Supplier said, well, it's nice to have what's in it for me, what can I do with it? If you do not oblige me, we will not start as of today. But we also Xavier told us, there is increased efficiency, less administration, no copying, no classification, no internal post distribution, and so on. The receptioning can be faster, of course, and for the most reliant suppliers, we even will do a blind receptioning, meaning that we will only do some, from time to time, random check. If the treatment is faster and the payment is on time, for your payment conditions, you only can gain. Many companies, people talk about digitalization and innovation. Well, definitely for EDI, there is no reason not to implement it anymore. It's a proven technology even. And most of the providers will give you a plug and play system to introduce it in your company. As the data accuracy increased very, very much, also the traceability for no matter what reason or recall or whatever is from very high quality. We talk about cutting the forests. Well, for paper, definitely we should all stop to send it and work on our sustainability. And definitely, last but not least, the system is always available 24/7. When the workers go home at 4, 5, or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and still there is an order coming in, the next day they come to the office, the order is already in the system. Now, what we hear today as main reasons why companies do not introduce it as of today. Recently there was a survey and the conclusion was that 60% of them still have a lack of EDI knowledge, and that's the main reason why they do not start. Also, the integration of dispatch advice with their MRP or ERP system is a reason not to start, and invoice, okay, it takes some more to test and compare with the hard copy, but that cannot stop the EDI rollout. If your third-party logistics is not yet ready, please push him. Also, he have to move on, or maybe you should change from third-party logistics. Where we buy on the clock, there is of course no order and also no three-way match. And then last, the smaller companies, I do understand, smaller companies, also the farmers, they do not have an IT department, so there we agree that it's not always easy to do it directly. Now, what can we do from Colruyt? First of all, Colruyt lowest prices. The 10% of suppliers that we have to start with, that was in our target rollout. We will move on for the next year. Order to cash, changing or switching to harmonized order to cash, we will not push. We will not urge the suppliers to change, but if they request, we will do it definitely. And then eCMR, very important for us. We want the European standard for CMR, so we can start the eCMR as soon as possible. Drivers take the CMR with them to another company, back to their home country, and a lot of CMRs are missed for us, for the suppliers, and we can start looking. As I said, the third version of harmonized order to cash, we do not support it yet, but I suppose next year we will work on it. Receipt advice, not in our top priority list, but as it takes also a lot of paper, definitely we will start with it soon or late. And then our colleagues from other business operating units, they have still some job to do. They are not early adopters, neither maybe laggards, so some job over there. And then Peppol, but I give the word to Cédric, who is our specialist in the Peppol business. Please.
Thank you, Johan. So, you know Colruyt, or I suppose most of you know Colruyt, but Colruyt's activity are just one part of the Colruyt Group. Colruyt Group is also a lot of other verticals, and for those other verticals, the standard or harmonized order to cash doesn't really fit the bill. Need something more universal, and that's why Peppol is introduced. There's food in Colruyt, but also health, non-food, energy, a lot of other verticals. So, in order to have also a normalized process for those other verticals, all of those branches have their own system to generate the e-invoices for their own business. And first, those need to be normalized. And once they are normalized, they can enter a Colruyt standardized or centralized component called the business communication module, in which the invoices are received, and from there they can be all sent and archived. This is the way to already do some centralization and normalization of this process before it is sent out to the customers. So sending invoices, as you can see here, Colruyt Group is sending a lot of them, 400,000 per month, but most of those invoices are still handed out in paper in the stores. Of course, this is the old way, and this needs to change. A lot of them are also sent by email, and those sent out by email also lead to a lot of inefficiencies in the management of the reception of those invoices, putting them in the accounting, validating them to finally lead to payout. So a lot of inefficiencies in both paper and email, and that's where both EDI with order to cash, harmonized order to cash, and Peppol can be of great help. They bring fully automated solutions for both the sender and the receiver, and then lowering the costs for both parties. The other solutions are less effective and go with a higher operating cost, so we're trying to phase out those solutions to go full electronic. Also, another advantage of Peppol compared to EDI is self-discovery. So instead of having to build those bilateral arrangements with EDI, you can really go out and roll out as the suppliers and the consumers on the Peppol network are being connected. So all advantages there for Peppol. In Colruyt, the Peppol architecture looks like this. For one of the brands or business units solutions, it's still sent out in EDIFACT, transferred to GS1 that does the transformation to then send out to Peppol. And for others, as we saw, those invoices are normalized. They go and are sent through a Peppol gateway, archived, all of them, and then sent directly to UBL. The objective is to have more of those invoices get out through Peppol through different initiatives. We'll explain this after. But it's not just about sending, it's also about receiving those invoices. And so the Colruyt Group wants to benefit from an efficiency gain as receiver of those invoices. They calculated that they have an average cost to process those paper and email invoices of €4 per invoice. So the idea there is to also get those invoices in an electronic way through EDIFACT or through Peppol. The main cost factor for email and paper is the OCR, and not really the OCR itself, but the errors that the OCR is making when recognizing those invoices. So that's the real cost factor that they want to remove. The rollout for receiving those invoices will start with 3 suppliers that have the most errors in the OCRs, and then we'll proceed with others. What we see as the future of e-invoicing is first having a universal exchange format, and for that we have UBL, cross-sector, so this is a great advancement for the future. We also see that many countries, and Belgium will follow, are leading to B2B exchange of invoices that will be sent out to the government to better collect taxes, so great for our taxes, and also great for the government, and also great for the companies that will adapt all of that to have more electronic invoices sent. And finally, it's not only a business of B2G, which is mandatory now in Belgium, it's also B2B for the efficiency gains, as we explained with Colruyt, both receiving and sending. And we believe that it will also reach the consumers, where later you will be able as a consumer to receive all your invoice in a single channel that you chose. And with this channel will come additional services like archiving, electronic and automatic payments, all the services that you can hope for when you're receiving invoices from your suppliers. If you have questions about EDI and Peppol and in Colruyt, Johan and I will be glad to answer them.
Thank you, Colruyt, for giving us some great insights in one of the retailers in Belgium and how it's being operated and so on. But nevertheless, two questions, one for each of you. The first question for Johan, if possible. Colruyt Group now has acquired some experience in both sectoral and cross-sectoral data exchange, as we have seen, of course. Could you highlight the most important reasons why Colruyt is betting on two horses, I would say?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's betting on two horses. It's just maybe a necessity. As you saw, we are not just the retail Colruyt. We became a big group with different types of businesses, nor just business to customers or to another business, but to governments, to whomever. We sell electricity, for instance. So we definitely have to work on new methodologies to improve our systems. And we cannot wait another 20 years like we did in the past to be in the front line.
Yeah, thanks for being that flexible. And then one question for Cédric, and some topic that I know you know a lot of. Do you think electronic exchange of transactional documents will have an impact on customer experience outside of the lowest price, of course, because that's the main key point of Colruyt.
There's the price, but today you go to a Colruyt as a company, you buy goods, and you get out with paper. Most of the time, this is what happens. That's the customer experience for the moment. So tomorrow, what we want to achieve is that you get out of Colruyt, you paid, okay? But you get out of Colruyt, and the invoice from Colruyt is already in your accounting system, maybe already paid through another system if it's paid through there, and not even at the cash. So this is a completely different way to process those invoices. You're not going to lose this invoice in your car, forget to give it to the accountant, forget to scan it. No, the invoice is there, and you don't have to worry about it. So that's transparent invoice, electronic invoice.
And that not only for business, but even as a simple private customer going to the Colruyt and so on?
Well, for the moment, those are not invoices that are sent. It's not bills, it's just a receipt that you get from Colruyt. But yes, I believe that this will be cross-sector and will come for a lot of the companies that are part of the Colruyt Group to consumers.
Great, that will be a great shift. All right, thank you both for your cooperation. And next speaker, Jan.
Thank you, Dirk and Cédric and Johan. Fantastic to see and to assess what a big retailer is doing on electronic invoicing and following two ways. So we heard already a bit about Peppol, and the next speaker is Serge Libert from the federal government, and he's responsible for Peppol in Belgium. So please, Serge, explain us what is this animal, what is this Peppol network doing, and how can companies take advantage of it?
Hello. Jan, I will do my best to try and explain that. The question that I was asked was what can Peppol bring to organization looking into digitizing the invoicing. And well, it means also that it is about organizations who have not yet started that digitization process. And there is some difference between the ones who are already in the front line, like we have heard, like Spadel and Colruyt, and the other ones who are not yet been able to take advantage of that innovation. According to the latest survey of our colleagues from the Simplification Agency, only 16% of invoices are today really fully electronic, meaning that there is a issuance of an electronic invoice, the transport of the electronic invoice, the reception and the processing, a fully automated process. And that is, in fact, what we are after. So other models where the invoice cannot really be fully automatically processed cannot be really considered e-invoicing. This is the goal. So there is still a large portion of scenario and enterprise who are not yet able to take advantage of electronic invoicing. And when we look at this traditional model was a lot of merits and benefits, we can still see that to implement that, it takes a long time, it takes some costs, and if you don't have sufficient volumes to make the return on these investments, then it will not be affordable for a lot of enterprises. And that is something that you have in a point-to-point in a bilateral model. So, shortly said, PEPAL tries to enable many-to-many larger adoption of electronic invoices by selecting and bundling a set of standards, a set of practices, a set of agreements in such a way that all the enterprises can work together and exchange really automatable invoices in an electronic way. It is not a platform, but it is more a rule of the game that makes this objective reachable. If you are looking at just one single enterprise, it goes without saying, and actually Jan has talked about that a little bit, it goes without saying that not all these enterprises have the IT staff and knowledge to be able to take this project in charge. So another very important ingredient in this is the mobilization of the IT sector. This kind of innovation will really be generalized once a certain sector will be able to bring that at their reach, and that is the role of the IT sector here. There are many other areas where the IT sector can still has a lot of challenges to address, but this one, the supply chain automation, is quite a pretty far advanced domain where such automation can take place, thanks to the investment of the early adopters, by the way. So it's not a contradiction, it's an evolution, and it's, of course, another story for the early adopter to adapt to that evolution. But for the ones who are starting today, PEPAL is really an enabler and a key, and it's also an enabler and a key once the IT sector will mobilize themselves to truly adopt this and promote this model. That is also where the public sector takes some part in charge. And the PEPAL, as I said, it's not a platform, it's rules of the game. It makes a federated network feasible between different service providers and solution providers. But it does not go on its own, and it needs a set of roles and responsibilities. And one important ingredient in this to secure cross-border interoperability, very large-scale interoperability, is the role of PEPAL authority. The different jurisdictions will appoint a PEPAL authority that will take in charge the promotion and also listening to the local specificities to make sure that it all works smoothly and that it does not break interoperability also at cross-border level, which is very important. At the same time, the public sector is also struggling for years with adoption of e-invoicing and supply chain automation, and that's not a surprise, because the public sector has to cope with a lot of different other sectors. And all these sectors, they have their own approach and standards. And up to a certain level, the public sector can adapt with that, but it's pretty limited. If the public sector really wants to enjoy the benefits of supply chain automation, they need the ingredients that make it universally working. And that is also a similarity with the smaller structure. These kind of entities, they also need very universal and standardized approaches, which is what PEPAL provides without impeaching sectoral or national standards to be used. I hope this clarifies a little bit the PEPAL question.
Yeah, thank you, Serge, for giving us some insights on why choosing PEPAL, how it's all about, how it's operating, why it has so much advantages and so on. But Belgium was one of the first countries joining PEPAL, as PEPAL authority, as Bosa is one of. Which were the main reasons for the Belgian government and Bosa, of course, to decide to join that framework, I would call it.
Yeah. Well, actually, we started with exploring B2G invoicing, so business to government invoicing in 2013 in the context of a program called OptiFed. Won't give details about that, but at this time, there was nothing about PayPal. It was just about finding a platform, connecting the senders and the receivers, and off we go. And it's 6 months project, something like that, the pilot. And the project took 2 years. And the main lessons that we learned from that pilot phase was really the difficulty to attract the senders, the suppliers. Each supplier coming into this during the pilot phase, which means that these guys were motivated to work together with the government. Well, each time it was a nightmare of discussion on all the details of the interaction and the transmission, and it made it a quite complex IT project. And first of all, the government is not an IT company, so they don't have the skills to cope with those kind of discussions. Second, it takes a long time and a high cost. And if you multiply that by all the possible suppliers of the government, it goes without saying that it defeats the purpose because it makes the whole thing much too expensive. That is the reason why we went looking for a kind of model where, yeah, you don't need to onboard the supplier. Once the supplier is in the model, then it works and it's reproducible and it makes the whole thing feasible. So for us, the PayPal was the key to enable that process.
Thanks, Serge. But I see you're a little bit ahead, so I will permit me to ask you one more question, because we have a lot of international audience there, and I want you to tell some bit more about the Mercurius platform, because that's something very specific here in Belgium, a central platform for sending invoices and so to public entities here in Belgium. And I'm certainly know that our international audience is interested in our national platform.
Yeah, I'm going to break something here because Mercurius is just a mailroom of the public sector, and you don't need to have any notion of Mercurius to send an invoice to the public sector. The only thing you know is to comply with the PayPal interoperability framework. PayPal is Mercurius is an instrument equipped with it's a platform receiving the incoming documents from the outside world. Like PayPal is like the postal network. Mercurius is the mailroom, and it is equipped with a portal so that the people can track and trace their sendings. Like when you send a colie on the post, and you like to have a portal where you see where is my colie in the delivery. That's the same kind of thing that Mercurius is providing, but it's not not really the main point in the thing. It's just a way to better connect the public sector with the PayPal interoperability framework. I would like to add a last thing regarding my previous explanation about the motivation to go PayPal with that pilot phase. We are now with more than 6,000 suppliers sending electronic invoice to the government completely electronically, and I'm pretty sure that without that PayPal approach, we would not be that far based on the experience that we have built during the pilot phase. So for me, it's an important confirmation that the approach works, and we did not invest that much time into this. It was really a gradual process where we did not have to care about the waking up of the suppliers. They come at their own pace and they join the model, and it makes it all affordable for the public sector.
Yeah, but nevertheless, a big advantage, a big success for creating that environment. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Serge. For the ones who are in the GS1 community, of course, if I translate this a bit to the GS1, like say vocabulary or language, what we have heard, what Serge was saying, if you align on the network you use to exchange transactional data. We are mostly talking on GDSN for master data. If you align as companies, and if you work with the same network, and if you align with the same content, then you can make progress. And so that's certainly something for the panel discussion. Next speaker is from the Belgian association representing, I'd say, almost all companies in Belgium, so the most important association in Belgium. And I'm sure that Edouard Roosens, will explain the importance of alignment, of standardization, of using the PEPL network, and making e-invoicing in Belgium happening, because the advantages for the companies are multiple. So Edouard, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here at this interesting GS1 seminar. My name is Edouard Roosens. I am the Chief Economist of the Belgian Business Federation, and I also lead a competence center on digital economy and innovation. And so that's why I also have some things to say, I hope, on the topic today. What I will say in 10 minutes will be, first of all, I will say some words on e-invoicing, what is the current situation. Then a few words on PEPL, what is the context where we are today. And finally, I will tell you what we are doing at the FEB around e-invoicing. So let's move into the content. First of all, the current situation of e-invoicing. Let me tell you, in 2012, we had a situation in which 75% of all invoices in Belgium were still sent on paper. 18% at that time were sent by email, and 6% were end-to-end electronic invoicing. Now, in 2020, the paper has been reduced drastically. It's only 25% of all invoices now that comes through paper. And there has been a very strong rise in invoices sent by email. So the number has gone up from 18% in 2012 to 60% today. What we really want, of course, is end-to-end electronic invoicing, because the advantages are a lot higher. And what we see for end-to-end e-invoicing is that this has risen. It has risen, so there's an advance, there's progress, from 6%, but only to 16%. So not the 60% of email, but 16%. And this is only one letter of difference, but the difference is, of course, huge. We would, of course, have all hoped that end-to-end e-invoicing by now would be 60% of all invoices going round. Why? Of course, because there's a big advantage in costs. You see there the savings you can have by simply sending a mail. As a sender, you still have some advantage. It's 2.42 euros less per invoice, but you still can gain through a fully integrated electronic format. And of course, at the reception side, you only gain 0.36 euros from getting an invoice by email, because most of the time you still have to print it and get it into your own system. So there still is a huge gain to make on the receiver side if we would all switch from these email invoices to end-to-end electronic invoices. So we are missing almost all the cost savings at the receiving end, and I think that really is a pity, and we should speed up on e-invoicing. And how can we do that? Let's say one of the things that is considered right now is, should we oblige in a certain way e-invoicing? Can we do some obligations? As you know, the Flemish government started a few years ago and said, well, by that year, we want all invoices to be sent to us in an electronic format. And this has worked quite nicely. So you have now, I think, in the Flemish community, somewhere around 90% of all invoices are sent to the Flemish government in PEPL format, so end-to-end e-invoicing. So that's a possibility. But there, of course, are different grades in which you can do it. You can say, okay, all invoices to all administrations can be done electronically, but you also have the option to oblige it for all companies, for example. I think that, for example, has been the case in Italy and or Portugal. So we're in that phase of decision making in Belgium. What will we do? And the Agency for Administrative Simplification, ASA, has done some research on that and has asked the question whether or not an obligation would be feasible for businesses. And then we see that 30% of businesses thinks that obligating e-invoicing would be perfectly feasible. And it's whether it is to authorities, you have 31.3%. To companies, it's very comparable, 30.8%. So you have about 3 out of 10 businesses that are enthusiastic about end-to-end e-invoicing and say, oh, no problem for us, you can make it obligatory. So we have to say honestly that it's mostly the big ones who are quite enthusiastic, who are most sophisticated also in using digital tools. But you see on the other hand that you have 4 out of 10 businesses which have a neutral response. That is a combination of we don't know exactly in what direction you want to go. We don't know that very much, so we give just a neutral response, or they want to stay in the systems where they are right now. And we also must try to understand why that is, I think, because we cannot forget invoicing of companies is business critical. If something goes wrong in your invoicing, and your customers don't pay you anymore for some reason or another, or pay you slower, that has quite dramatic or important business impacts. So it's critical. Companies find that very important. And of course, there is an enormous diversity in the way that businesses handle their financial and accounting processes. It ranges from, if we start with the bigger firms, they often have their own invoicing systems, and they really have proper systems of their own. Then you have the mid-caps. They often have large ERP systems in which an invoicing module is foreseen. Then others, the smaller ones still, they use accounting software, and they use some apps. Some of these apps use Peppol, and that's okay. Some of these accounting softwares also use Peppol. So that is also a possibility to move into the e-invoicing end-to-end. But then you have a whole lot of very small businesses who still collect paper invoices, put them in a box, and give them to their accountant who really works on these invoices. So with the small businesses, you still have a very important paper world in which the accountant also plays a very important role. So it's a very complex and diverse landscape, and it's just important to understand why a large part of businesses today is still lukewarm about e-invoicing, because it's business critical and they do not want to change too much, and there are a lot of very small businesses with relatively low digital skills. So that's the situation where we are in right now. Just sketching a few things around Peppol. Of course, the need for e-invoicing was first felt with the big businesses when they started to more and more outsource more and more services. So they needed to pay more and more invoices, and so e-invoicing had, of course, for the big companies, promises of significant savings. And so it developed in a sector-specific environments. You had this development of e-invoicing, and we all know Edifact, of course, in the fast-moving consumer goods, retail, food, etc. But there were also very specific systems for the car and garage sector, for example, in which there were also were developed these kind of sectoral invoicing systems. So this was what first came about. Of course, at a certain point, you get problems with the fact that these systems are fragmented and they all use a different language. There was so no common language. And you get this need for harmonization, because only by harmonization you will be able to connect with businesses outside these ecosystems, these sectoral ecosystems, or to connect between these sectoral ecosystems. So this need for harmonization was heartfelt, and so in 2008-2012, an EU system was developed, which is now known as Open PEPL, and the regulations around that were somewhat more clearly put in 2017 and 2019. And of course, what is PEPL? As of course Serge already mentioned it. This is of course a standardized format, a common language, typically XML, UBL. I'm not the technical guy around that point. You have access points, and of course you have all framework agreements with these participants. And of course the PEPL system was meant to be a European-wide system, so you already now have it in use in 19 countries across the European Union, and it's growing all the time, and it's also becoming more and more the worldwide standard. So you also have at the moment Japan, Australia, New Zealand who are using PEPL, and also the US is thinking about using the system. But on the other hand, we are well aware within Europe you have a few big countries, notably Germany and France, where some proper systems still exist. So it's going in the right direction in Europe, but we are still not where we should be, where everybody uses it in Europe as a kind of a default system. The advantages, I'm not going to dwell too much longer on that. I think you all know that there are a lot of advantages of using such a harmonized system. I just wanted to talk with you now, just summing up for a few minutes where we are and what we as the FEB are trying to do to advance e-invoicing. So, first of all, we are in a very complex landscape of financial processing, as I just said, with accountants, with solution providers, with software vendors, etc. We have very slow progress at the moment for end-to-end e-invoicing. We are at 16%, which is by far not enough. So there are massive cost and efficiency gains still possible. The governments are helping us. They are pushing by developing things like PEPL, but also by doing these business-to-government invoicing obligations, and they will become stronger and stronger. And I just read an arrêté royal, which says that in Belgium, all invoices above 3,000 euros to the government will become obligatory to be sent in an electronic format in the next 6 to 12 months. So the surroundings are getting better and better for e-invoicing. But what we noted as VBO-FEB when we started our business expert group, which is the BEG as we call it, the business expert group around e-invoicing, we noted that still quite some technical business problems persisted. We cannot forget that Open PEPL, of course, is a system designed for public procurement, so the invoice in there is defined as a standard kind of invoice. And in Belgium, we had a lot of typical Belgian business practices, like discounts for cash payments, credit notes for empties. The Colruyt knows that very well. How do you treat empties? We had problems with our big telco suppliers. They liked to make their invoices with 4 digits behind the comma, whereas PEPL only give the possibility to do 2 digits after the comma. So it's also very slight but important technical questions. We had specific regimes in Belgium for VAT treatment for spare parts in the garage sector. There were questions in the port of Antwerp on how to work with different currencies. So in the end, all these problems, we listed them, we talked about them, we searched for solutions, and in a very good collaboration with GS1 and with Bosa, with Serge Libert, we managed to create a manual which is now published on the website of einvoicebelgium.be, and where all these kind of small but important practical problems are listed, and where a solution in XML is presented. So if there are other parties who are watching today, I don't know whether there are a lot of Belgian audience, you're always, if you're really into this topic, you're always welcome to join this business expert group. It's an open format, so just send an email over towards me, er@vbo-FEB.be, and you can always participate in this important working group. Just summing up, we are trying as the FEB to contribute to the electronic exchange of data across sectors. We firmly believe in PEPL as the default language, the one common language for e-invoicing, but we also believe that the system will be default so that some sectoral systems will still remain very useful for specific sectors with specific issues. So I think that is the main message we are trying to help, and we hope that e-invoicing will get to the 60% in a few years' time. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward, for showing us the Belgian situation and to highlight us on some key points. Just a small question for you, Edward. Since the Federation of Belgian Enterprises is overarching different sector organizations, do you think some evolution, or do you see some evolution there on working towards one global language for exchanging data? So the cooperation between the sectors in Belgium, how's that going?
Well, let's say that one common language, I think it already exists. So the European Commission has done a lot of work around PEPL, and I think this will become the common language. Although, as I said, I think it is a default language, and if in some sectors there are some needs which far exceed the possibilities of Open PEPL, I think there will still be a niche and a market for languages that are a little bit more complicated. You can call them some dialects, which are a little bit more complicated and give a little bit more possibilities in some sectors where it is really needed. Which have a very big complexity, which have special issues that only arrive in this sector. So I don't think we need to work now on something new. I think PEPL exists, it's very good, it's a very good default language. Let's try to support it and get to a world where PEPL is the default e-invoicing language, and some other specific languages for some sectors exist at the same time.
Yeah, and indeed, the Business Expert Group is one great sort of, tool to overcome national problems and to see how PEPL can be implemented locally, I would say.
We try to make it work.
Yeah, thank you for participating.
A pleasure.
Yeah. All right, now it will take some time to change to the new setting, I presume. New setting for a panel discussion. We're just making some arrangements, and I see my guest speakers coming. It will be most of all the same persons that have presented their topic, so be reassured there will be practically no new people. But after these inspiring sessions, I think it's time to focus on some more specific topics and to talk a bit about what's happening and what can be done to take it one step further. One first question, and I'm still missing someone. Oh, there's Xavier. The first question for you, Xavier, because it was really needed that you were there. A very specific question that was already put in the poll, if I got it right. Will old school EDI survive? You as a Spadel organization?
Survive is a strong word.
Yeah,
EDI will continue, but EDI will also evolve on time in order to be always aligned with the needs. So we have to involve it. It's not survive. So if you understand the difference.
I just call it adapt to do it.
Yes,
how
we have to
collaborate,
adapt.
how change.
Yes. For sure. We have to adapt because the process will also involve. So all all apps has to follow the evolution of the business, to follow the evolution of the different application, and also the evolution of the different legal requests, because we speak about invoicing. And so if you speak about invoicing, you speak about amount, but also legal stuff to apply. And as explained just before, Belgian country is probably not the smallest easy one in order to apply all differences, exceptions, and mention. It's
great.
It's a permanent attention point, and so we have to evolve the system permanently.
Yeah,
and it will remain for probably some customers, depending of the size of the company, depending also of the tool used into the company. Is it a big ERP or a smallest accountable application? Well, it will depend. We have to adapt the tool with the business, with the size of the business, and with the finality of the business.
Yeah, that's something that GS1 Belgium Luxembourg is certainly taking care of, and watching the legal obligations changes that are being done there.
And probably a standard tool can help each player in order to be on time and on a quick time on the market with the needed request. That's for me an important word. So if you speak about harmonization, you don't need to reinvent the world, because invoicing is an obligation with a lot of standard points. So it's not the time to reinvent. Invoicing is invoicing, point.
So let's call it evolution then.
Yes,
instead of
we need
surviving.
evolution. We need evolution.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, that's something that we will take care of, certainly. Cédric, more or less same question for you, because you're more the Peppol guy, the new kid in the block, I would call it. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so there has been a lot of investment into EDI and specialized in some sectors. This investment will continue to bear fruit with the optimization that you already have. It's not going to disappear, but I still think that it will be slowly fading away. The fact that we now have, since a few years already, these standard way to send out invoices in a cross-sectoral manner means that it's, in many cases, there is no need for this extra layer that will be specific to a sector. And when you don't need it, then it's better to switch to the cross-sector standard. For specific cases, those that are not managed yet through the basic format, UBL format that is sent out within Peppol, there is also ways to send those invoices or those specific documents through the Peppol network as specialized documents, saying that, okay, me as a sending access point, I can send out this type of document. Are you on the other side ready to receive this kind of document? Yes, you are, then we can also exchange it. So I think that there are two different things that are evolving. There's the standardization and what can we do in terms of basic building blocks of UBL, and then there's how can we use the Peppol network to send out other types of documents that before were maybe exchanged on specific networks. And so I think that these two tracks will evolve to more adoption of Peppol, but it won't be anytime soon that EDI will disappear.
Yeah. But are you now hinting in building extensions on top of Peppol, for instance, or in what direction are you thinking? Because sectoral formats, very specific sectoral stuff, will always be there. Today, it's more or less not possible in Peppol because Peppol is one global core standard.
No. I think that Serge will
it's not
explain it better.
completely well. I think that there is some amalgam that is made. Peppol is an interoperability framework, and you have several principles, and an important principle is the common denominator format. If I'm starting to do business with China, I'm not going to learn Chinese to day one. I will use Globish to start my business relationship. That is the positioning of the common denominator language. But then, as my business relationship grows and matures, then perhaps I would feel the need to learn the language of my business partner, Chinese, to go deeper in my business relationship. Because like you say, the Globish is the Globish. It's pretty limited in sophistication. So at some point in time, you will move to a more sophisticated dialect or language, call it whatever you want, to move on to a better level of business. And it's not only for invoices, it's for the whole set of documents that you exchange in your business, from the ordering, the contract, the dispatch advice, the invoice, the payment advice. There is a whole chain of business document or business data sets, because it's not really a document, it's just a piece of data. And that combination of multiple possible formats with the common denominator principle makes sure that all the people can go in business. And that's PEPL. So there is no contradiction between the PEPL principle and the sectoral needs. On the contrary, in a very mature model, I think that the common denominator format will not be the dominant format used on the framework, on the network. It would rather be the different dialects that would be used for the sectoral purposes, and only when there is no match between the sender and the receiver, then you switch down to the common denominator language. That remains to be seen according to the effective needs, and we are not that far now. And I would like to finish my explanation with the mention that we did not invent, well, PEPL, nobody in PEPL invented that common denominator language. That was delivered by the European Union, who has financed the elaboration of a standard for the cross-sector and the cross-border exchange in the context of that Directive 2014/55, which also imposes the public sector to be able to receive and process the electronic invoice that comply with that format. And that format is also supposed to meet the needs of B2B exchange, as long as it is not specific to a certain sector. And I think that a lot of invoices that are exchanged today in the B2B prove that it is feasible. It is just a matter of looking how the different patterns exactly need to be matched into that format, and that is, in fact, the purpose of the Business Expert Group, to proceed with these works at Belgian level. So it's, I think, a good match that we have in Belgium at the moment.
All right, thank you for explaining us and to showing and to elaborate on this. Then I come to Dirk Geerts as a service provider operating in Belgium for Seeburger, if I got it right. How do you see this match between the, call it the old school way of working and the new PEPL thing? Because PEPL also, Seeburger also is very active on PEPL on the one hand, but on the other hand has quite some experience also in the sectoral format and so on. What's your opinion on this?
Yes, well, in fact, everything has been said already by the different speakers, but yeah, it's all about integrating businesses with each other. It's a relation between a supplier and a buyer, and whether it's EDI or it's PEPL or we try to help, or we should find a way how you can automate and more digitalize the exchange of documents. If you ask me, is old school EDI being replaced or matched by PEPL? I would say, first of all, the PEPL. Of course, we as a service provider, we are also active on PEPL. Very sure, there are some real advantages compared to the classical or the old school EDI, such as the standardization, or let's more call it the simplification, especially that you don't need a one-to-one connection between your supplier and your buyer. This is one of the things that is needed in EDI. So I would say, yeah, in Peppol, it's with the system or the mechanism of access points that's covered, and that makes it much easier to have a broader reach if you want to roll out digitalization of your documents. And of course, the standard format, it's also in EDI, you also have standard formats. You have EDIFACT and NCX12 and other, but we really see an advantage over there. On the other hand, of course, EDI will still be there, I think, in 10 years and in 20 years as well. But the focus in Peppol, we are all talking about, of course, a lot. I hear a lot about invoices, but in EDI, well, the less important document actually is the invoice. It's the last, well, so you have a lot of other documents, and I see still a challenge for Peppol in the other documents, like the orders, the dispatch advice, the typical documents that are exchanged. So anyway, it's let's say Peppol is really let's say an advantage. It will help us, and why shouldn't we use it? So that's
yeah. So as a service provider, is certainly not a threat. It's more an evolution that
yes, of course.
You had some expertise on the past, on the classic EDI, and now you're going on the flow, I would say, towards Peppol and the new thing. Yeah. Edward, can I ask you a question? Do you have any idea why the electronic invoicing cross-sector and B2G and so on is taking up so slow? So you already elaborated a bit there. Could you highlight us the reasons why small businesses are so hesitating about taking the first step? Is it not knowing what's ahead? It's not. Is it? I don't know. Perhaps you can elaborate on this.
I think, as said, it is critical. Yeah. Invoicing, and it's not very easy. And systems exist. Yeah. So that's the whole thing. Systems exist. Sometimes they are changed, but of course, to switch from an ERP system that spills out invoices, which are always put in an envelope, to really make something integrated, where invoices come in and get out through one system, that means changing it all. And so they are a bit reluctant. It costs a lot and it contains risks. Yeah. So, and things are working well at the moment. Yeah. So that's the difficulty. And also although it's critical, it's back office. Yeah. So what are all these CEOs thinking about? That is, oh, my business and my customers, and they have to see me and my products and my product innovation, and a new nice web store and marketing and these things. And then you come to something which works well, is back office, costs a lot and contains a lot of risks. So there is, to overcome that, the government thinks, well, no problem, we just ask them, you switch to at a certain point in time. So that's the whole thing about these obligations. For big businesses, no problem. The FEB will not be protesting, you know. Most of our businesses are well underway to the digital and the e-invoicing world. But obliging things when your take-up rate is 16%, I think that you forget something very important, and that is change management. Yeah. That is, you really, in Belgium, you should go out to businesses, explain all the possible, because I talked about it's a complex landscape. There are all kinds of businesses with all kinds of different systems. Everybody asks themselves, yeah, but in my specific situation, what should I do? And you have 10 systems with 10 variations, so you rapidly come to that you must have a checklist if you want to help them of 20 possible answers, perhaps. So it's not really easy, but it should be done. I think we really should develop what exists, how can we find a solution for each case, and propose that case and say how much does it cost, and is there a risk involved or not, and how long does the digital transformation process could it take, and people just don't have an idea how much will it cost and what will it bring, and how difficult will it be, and they don't in a lot of cases don't even know what should I use, what are the possibilities.
And how do I start?
Is it easy or not? How do I start? It's very basic. And very basic with a lot of possibilities. That means that you really have to think about, go out there, see what is all existing, and try to find solutions for all these cases. Standard. So it's a big change management exercise. And then go out again with the solutions to businesses. And it's not to the big ones that you have to come. It's really to the really small businesses where there's a lot of anxiety and perhaps a reluctancy about this changeover. So I think first do the change management exercise and then do the obligation.
Any idea how we could overcome this? Is this something that we should point out more clearly, that there are considerable gains we can achieve, or how would you tackle it?
It's like myself, I know that solar panels would be a good thing for my house, you know? I know. It will be a gain. But I think it's critical. Perhaps something might go wrong in the installation, and perhaps my house will no longer, there will be leakages of water or something. You have some risks, and it's complicated, but you know, and I think people know there's a gain. Businesses know there's a gain. I think they know it will be simpler, it will be cheaper, but it's just, they don't know how to start with it. And as long as they don't know clearly, they think the risk is too important and they don't do it. So it's just stay as we are. It's much simpler, and we're safe.
So there is not really a trigger to accelerate.
Well, you know, you can try it. You can say the take-up rate is now 16%. You can say obligation by that date. But I think we will have a lot of troubles with businesses not understanding, with not being ready at the moment that you make the obligation. They will lose markets because they cannot no longer sell to the government. So if you go too quickly, there might be a backlash.
And in phases, even first the bigger companies, then the mid-sized companies.
That's surely an option. That's surely an option. But you know, it's always better to put dates up front, which are a bit longer in the future. But really take your time to do all the communication, the change management, and then go out on the streets and make sure that everybody has had the possibility to understand how it works a year before the obligation. And I'm talking more for Unizo and UCM than for my own business federation, more for the small businesses.
And that more or less brings us to the French situation, where government in France has announced the way forward there, obligation and so on. Perhaps, Serge, you could elaborate on what's going to happen in France, and is this something that could be possible also in Belgium, and how government is thinking on this, perhaps? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I'm completely the best expert of the French situation. I know that there has been well, long story with Colruyt Pro for the B2G, and then now they are coming with ambitions for the B2B, and they have an approach that at French, within the French boundaries, makes a lot of sense. You see that they have thought about it, and basically they provide also the support to make the thing happen, and the time frame, the different phases, like you said, they start. Well, the first thing is they put something to let anybody receive an electronic invoice. Probably it's not completely. It's not because you receive it that you can enjoy the benefits of automating the processing. Of course, you still need a tool to automate the processing when you receive it, and that is something the government, even the French government, cannot deliver to all the businesses in France, and it would defeat a lot of important principles of our economy. But nevertheless, they provide something that makes it possible for the whole plan to be rolled out, because it is important to oblige, if you want to oblige, it is important to oblige the sender. If you just oblige the receiver, but the sender is bound to nothing, then you don't get the benefits. And that is a little bit the drawback of the European directive. It just obliges the receivers. That enables something, but there's still a long way to go to make it happen. You need at some point to come with a message to the sender. And that is what they do in France in a phased approach, starting with the big companies and then the medium and the small and the very small one over the years. I suppose that they will also have a program to inform and manage the change at these different levels. And yes, in Belgium, probably some people are informed that there are also ambitions from the tax administration, and that is again in the context of closing the tax gap.
Yeah,
Seems that in Belgium we have quite a very important tax gap, several billions, 3 billion. So it would be nice to close that tax gap so that we have a fairer taxation. So I think that's very interesting. Electronic invoicing contributes to that process. It's not, well, electronic invoicing has also other purposes. Here we are in a discussion about the business efficiencies, and that remains for us the main important point. But the relationship with the taxation process is obvious, and that is something that also creates some kind of common interest in sorting out the whole thing. There are other aspects that roll out from e-invoicing, like all the financing of our economy can be dramatically improved thanks to the dematerialization of the invoice. It's important data to better manage the cash flows of the economy, to have shorter financing cycles, to develop new financial products. So our banking sector is probably also interested into this. All these things are additional benefits that do not relate immediately to the business efficiencies, but nevertheless are quite important and are part of the digital transformation. So we need to think in these different directions to also, how can I say, to feed the policy making. At this point in time, I think in Belgium we are more in the policy making process, and what it will deliver, we will see, but I think that there will be a lot of consultation and discussion, and that way I think that there will be a good preparation for the change management that Edouard is recommending to not forget in the process.
All right, thank you, Serge. Something Colruyt is thinking about? What will the impact be there? Because if that is an obligation tomorrow, it's certainly it's going to change the way of processing data, exchanging invoices and stuff at Colruyt. Are they already preparing?
So just like in Spadel, Colruyt is sending out a lot of invoices and is ready to respect the obligations set out by the state, of course, but we want to go further and innovate and get those benefits of sending and receiving electronic invoices. We don't want to wait, so the extra gain that we can get from doing those changes, we want them sooner than later. So yes, we're working on that. We also know that there's a lot of consultation that is already taking place, a lot of I would say public announcements and sending out the word, the good word from the federal government, from the Flemish government. There has been a lot of initiatives that already pushed for more PEPL adoption. And Colruyt, as one of the big invoicers, wants to go farther and faster in those electronic exchanges. And if we can get the benefits, the economical benefits of sending and receiving those invoices, if we can have a fair tax system with that, if this can be done in a unified way without having too much investment needed to make it happen, there is some complications or some little burdens to overcome. We need to plan it, to make it happen. But the gains are worth it, and so yes, we're going forward to do it.
Thank you. Xavier, are you?
Yes, but I'm not sure that the obligation is the best way to promote this kind of application. We have to promote the benefits, the advantage, before to oblige somebody to use this kind of application. Because don't forget that when you speak about invoice, you speak about the incomes of your company. So you have to secure the income of your company through the best way, with the less administrative task, which is risk of errors. So we have also to reduce the re-encoding. And so PayPal is probably the best way to avoid that and to avoid data, to avoid errors in the invoicing, to the invoicing process. So obligation, I'm not sure. To promote the advantage, to facilitate, and to probably when you promote the advantage, you can facilitate the change management. Because in the smallest company, it's always a specific, our activity is so specific, so we can't harmonize. It's not possible to harmonize my system because I'm so specific.
Yeah.
What is most standard as an invoicing? The invoicing point. Yeah. For me, it's not need to explain more. We have to tackle the sensitive point of the people and speak about the incomes. Be sure that it will come on time in order to pay your people, your workers, and facilitate it. So no unproductive works, re-encoding, avoid it. Okay. Let's speak about obligation.
I think Xavier touches on a very, very important point. That is how to gain the hearts and minds of the entrepreneurs and the business leaders. Yeah. What is the best way? I agree when an application has a use of 80, 85, 90%. Okay, you can say many people are using it, it's working well, technically it's okay, so you can oblige it. When we're at 16%, and on top of that, you say, well, the FEB has been working now for 5 years to promote electronic invoicing by stressing the advantages, lower cost, efficiency gains, less encoding or less recoding. So that's a good spirit. You're trying to convince people of all the advantages of the system. So we were always in that spirit, and we've made some nice advances in good collaboration with the Project Bosa. And then we were very surprised to read in the notifications of the budget of 2022 that the e-invoicing, business to business, would become obligatory in the future for anti-VAT fraud reasons. So there are, it's formulated like something in fraud in the VAT chain, and to cope with that, we are going to make the e-invoicing B2B obligatory. This is not a way to make people enthusiastic about e-invoicing. People will say, oh, it's just to avoid fraud, so digital is getting more taxes out of my business or something like that. Okay, if they really commit fraud, it's not okay, of course. It's a good second goal, but it cannot be the primary goal. To convince people, the primary goal should be, what's in it for you? What's in it for you? Less costs, less recoding, simpler. That's the way to promote things, not by saying when only 16% of uptake, BAF obligatory in the next few years because of to fight fraud. That's no way of Businesses should be partners, as we have always been with the Bosa bijvoorbeeld. FEB was a partner, all the businesses were partners, and we tried to work together to move forward. And with the tax administration, it's much more difficult. They really should set up user groups where the stakeholders are all involved, and then we can have a collaborative sphere and move forward and stress the advantages rather than saying it's obligatory because we're going to fight fraud. That's not a good way.
Interesting point. Yeah, Cédric, you wanted to...
I agree that the fraud part is not the best way to get the entrepreneurs moving. Definitely not. But it's been 5 years then the promotion of Peppol has started in Belgium. So a lot of effort has already been made to promote the advantages of using Peppol. I believe that this fraud thing is a way to get the message out there and to force somehow the businesses to take this step finally. And I think it's very important that we reframe it as fraud is one part of the benefits, but the business benefits, the cash that you're going to have, the reduction of the cost that you're going to have should be the main reason why you're doing it. But the government is still putting an extra nudge on it with the fraud, and you need to do it. Yeah. So I think that it will put the message out there. People will talk about it. There will be a lot of discussion. The FEB will be against it or not in favor. And I think it's the game. It's to get the word out there. And if it needs to go through an obligation, well, so be it. As long as the end result is there, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, it's certainly something that politicians will decide, and that we will have to take it. If we love it or not, it's not up to us, I presume. But Serge, you will...
As I said, I think that we are in this phase in the policy making step. So there will be a lot of consultation. There will be a lot of work before we know exactly, before there is a decision made. And I think that we also need... Like you say, it's not one or the other. There are different stakes, and there is a good balance between all these things that need to be found. And I think that is perfectly feasible. It's not one or the other. It's one and the other. We're also in an European context where the fraud is also cross-border. So it's quite important to find a way to also address that kind of fraud. As you said, it's probably the obligation, not the right way to convince the entrepreneur, but it's a good way to convince the taxpayer who is paying for that fraud. Yeah. You also need to take this into account. And another point is that in order to make universal processes work, you don't need only the enablers, you also need a decision. And that decision needs to be made at the collective level sufficiently wide to make it happen. And I think that it would really be nice if we could use our democratic processes to drive this collective action, but that means also a decision with an obligation, with an enforcement, because you cannot have that collective action and then say, okay, but yeah, you are still free to choose, because then the people... If they don't see the point, they stay waiting. And a last important point is that all these things will not happen if the IT sector does not get the right message. And if there is no obligation, then there's no sufficient market guaranteed, and then the people, they don't develop the solution. And if you want to equip all those small businesses, you need a huge investment from the IT sector. To justify that, I think that the collective decision is not a bad thing. Yeah.
But just perhaps a solution could be that, like we are working in the business expert group, where government, several stakeholders, government, bigger companies, accountants, all kinds of sectors come together. We put a problem on the table, and then we look for a solution. So that could eventually be a possible solution also in Belgium, if we could collaborate between different sectors. But Dirk, yes, of course, yes.
Yeah, just one. I hear a lot about making it mandatory or not, and I really, in the history, I saw already a lot of initiatives to promote cost savings with e-invoicing, to make it attractive to companies. So if we all know that it's cost saving, it's improving the process, why is it such a big problem to make it, like in other countries already, make it mandatory? And then we are all humans. And if you don't say to me you must do it, because if you don't do it, you feel it in your income, then as the example with the solar plates, oh yeah, it's nice, it's interesting, but yeah, I will wait because maybe, and that's the same. Maybe I see it simple, but why is it so difficult to make it mandatory?
Yeah, but also take into account the potential
costs and risks involved, of course. Yeah, some costs, some risks. So perhaps they're small. I know they're small, but not every small business knows that the costs are not too big. You know.
Yeah, but
so we all know that it's cost saving.
So. I
think it's best to put a date up front and to say, well, from that date onwards, and then you have some time to really go. And when the date is there, people also know, oh, something will be changing at a certain date in the future. They will be more ready to listen. I would give some time and I try to convince and explain a lot beforehand. I know everybody here has the impression that a lot has been done, but I think there's quite some change management to be done in the smaller businesses mainly.
All right, thanks, big thank you to all of you for providing us these kind of insights and being here. So this was our panel discussion. A big thank you to our guest speakers before our panel conversation, I would call it. So I would now give the microphone to Laurens Verbist. He is head of supply chain at Makro, and he will wrap this edition of this Innovation Café. He will wrap it up with one last summary of what's going on. So I should move, I presume. All right, thank you for participating and see you.
All right. Good evening. Before I close the afternoon, maybe first, who am I? Let me quickly introduce myself to you. I'm Laurens Verbist. I work for Makro Belgium, where I'm head of supply chain, master data, logistics, goods flow planning, but also EDI are areas of my responsibility. And since 2 years, I also represent Makro in the GS1 board, where I'm also an active member of the GS1 Innovation Committee. So that's also why I'm here today speaking to all of you. I've heard some very interesting subjects today from the very different people speaking. And you know what? When I think about innovation, I think always on something from the very far future. Not always something which is already tangible, but actually the subjects we've heard here today are right in front of us. So, you know, it's actually also quite a long time since I last spoke on a GS1 stage. It was 2014, when other retailers and I were doing a pitch on dispatch advice and SECC, and it was something which was not very new back then, but also not very adopted by the industry yet. But I recall very well, we were actually trying to sell the advantages towards the suppliers. And today, 7 years later, I must say, these standards are very common practice. So it has changed and people have adopted it. And, you know, for the very simple reason, the benefits you get out of it are undeniable. And I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what will happen in the future, but I really do believe that the very same thing will exactly happen on the topics we've heard today. So I believe in a few years from now, the things we've heard have been adopted by the industry much more than they have today. Earlier this week, I asked my colleague Bert, who is our EDI coordinator, on how he sees EDI developing and where we as a company struggle with. And actually, he said, a lot of companies or partners of us are working with EDI. He said also, you see the advantages of harmonized order to cash or PEPL, but companies tend to stick to their classic ways of working, to old habits. And it works. I heard it. It works and it will keep on working, but it stops the innovation. Yeah? And more importantly, it's not efficient. So that's also when I learned it won't just come naturally, you know. People need to invest, people need to take time to really put energy into it. And for some time now, people have been changing their activities and their habits and are shifting more and more to the internet. They have been doing this mostly on the move with their smartphone, which is easy to use, it's very convenient, you can use it anytime, anywhere. And, you know, the digitalization of the world just seems to happen to us. On Saturday night, I was watching with my oldest daughter, she's 5, a show on TV, which is quite famous in Flanders. And the show is called K2 Looks for K3. So it's actually a contest where 2 singers are looking for a 3rd singer. And it was a Saturday night live television show where they were going to award the winner of the contest. But a few days before, it came out that one of the singers, Marta is her name, was sick. She was hit by corona. Yeah? So I said, okay, most probably they will need to cancel the show because I don't see it happening. But it was not the truth, you know. That exact same night, she was on stage. Not live because she was actually performing out of home, but she was on stage on a digital display. I mean, I said, wow, yes, digitalization is just everywhere. And not only subjects like that, but also in our daily life, you see other things going on, things that we all do. Doing groceries online is something we all do, we all have experienced. You have tax on web. Huh? Who of us still does it on paper? I don't believe anyone practically does it still on paper. And then, for example, you have at McDonald's, you order at a machine. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is that everything becomes electronically. Everything becomes automated. So you should question, why not do the exact same thing with our administrative processes? I mean, we can find the same way of automations in that process. I even dare to say it's the digital maturity level that decides the future of your company. Companies today that fail to embrace digitization are actually losing revenue year after year. And we're all looking to save costs, right? The figures of what can be saved have been shared here today by the different parties. And even more, last week I read an article that when Belgian companies would switch over to e-invoicing, they could save up to, listen, 3.4 billion euros. 3.4 billion euros that can be saved for the growth of our companies, of our businesses. The new technological possibilities will bring you cost advantages in your order flow and in many other processes. You will win time, that's sure. And most importantly, it can further discount your products or services, and it will give you a competitive advantage. So we've been talking about costs, about efficiency, about automation, and And you know what? This is where standardization comes in place, where GS1 comes in place. And this is possible by harmonized order to cash and or PEPL. And I believe that thanks to a uniform integrated EDI solution, there will be a positive return on investment, which might be questioned still today out in the world. So I heard my colleagues of Colruyt today, this afternoon, and they were very, very right, you know. It's not a nice to have anymore, but it's a need to have. So the advantages are fully clear. I would say, let's start connecting the systems, also the people, and the more business partners, the greater the economies of scale will be. I would say, do it now, because time is really short. Some interesting years are ahead of us with lots of opportunities. And do not forget, GS1 is there to support. We are, or they are, a knowledge center. They can help you get started. So that was my closure. Thank you all for listening. But before you go, we should watch the poll and see how it has changed over the session. If I recall well, the answer was yes. Is there still a future for old school EDI at the beginning of the session? So let's see what it has become at the end of the session, because I believe that the advantages are fully clear. So let's see what it is about. While I just said it, we need to wait a little bit until the results are here. I can already look to the future as well. And in March, there will be a next innovation committee. It will be on the digital passport of products. So that's something to look forward to. We will have some very interesting speakers also planned at that moment. Hopefully, it will be something which is in a live environment, which was also planned today. But okay, Corona's here. We need to face the reality. But hopefully in March, we can do it very live. And like Jan in the beginning said, it's an innovation cafe. When he invited me, I also said, it will be a brown pub where I can drink a beer afterwards. Well, that's not the case, but maybe then we can all do. Lisa, the results are in?
Yes, a bit more people than before say no, so I think some people are looking forward to the future.
Okay, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I think the advantages are so clear, so good that we are trying to shift the people's mind. And thank you for all attending, and see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.